Fantastic. So I will go ahead and call this Iowa City Community School Board meeting on Tuesday, March 24th, 2020 to order. We have a quorum of board members with Sean Isone. Sorry, folks, I need to scroll a little bit to see everybody. Ruthina Malone, Paul Ressler, Charlie Eastham, J.P. Clausen, Lisa Williams, and then a number of administrators attending the meeting this evening. We will start our meeting by approving the agenda for tonight. Is there a motion to approve?
A motion to approve.
Second.
Kim, we're ready to vote.
And I am having trouble logging into Board Docs. I'm not sure why, but I vote to approve.
Online voting is open. Oops, you got it. Okay. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Okay, next up is our consent agenda. Do we have a review of the bills this period?
I believe Sean and I reviewed them electronically through the invoices. After reviewing them, I didn't have any questions.
Same here.
Okay, are there items directors would want to pull from the consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve our consent agenda?
I move that we approve our consent agenda.
Second.
Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
I also vote yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Public hearing, Sean?
Hey, Janet, before we move on, can I just say something about that last vote?
Sure.
I just wanted to point out that we had 3 step 7s on there. So we'll be starting a couple approved contractors. So we'll be starting a couple of great projects at Lemmy, Northwest, and replacing the lights at City High. So I just want to let people know that are watching there.
That's awesome. Thanks, Paul. I know public will be, and many constituents will be interested in hearing that information. Thanks for highlighting that. Okay, Sean.
All right, now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2020 roof improvement project at Twain Elementary. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on March 10th, 2020. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on March 11th, 2020. The district will receive bids on this project at 2:30 p.m. April 2nd, 2020 at the physical plant office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on March 11th, 2020. Are there any questions from the board? And I don't know if we have any public, but are there any questions from them if they're there?
Okay, thanks, Sean. That concludes our public hearing. We'll move into our discussion item this evening, and that is around our COVID-19 response plans. I just want to say thank you to all of the efforts of the district team. I mean, what we've been doing, what you've been doing, the communication, the planning, the logistics, feeding kids, all the things, technology, getting the instructional resources out. It's just, I know it's been a heavy, heavy Herculean lift, and just want to thank everyone for everything you've been doing and being so responsive to the needs of the community in this really, truly unprecedented time. And so with that, I do know that we do have a resolution around the pandemic pay, but I don't know if there's other topics that we would want to cover first. Just as an update, or if directors have questions they would like to ask about our response plans.
There's 3 things that we'd like to share to start with. We'd like to talk to you about our meal delivery and give you a quick update on that. There was a webinar with the Department of Ed today. We'd like to talk to you a little bit about the teaching and learning plan and the materials that are out right now. And then we'd like to give you an opportunity to get some questions asked and answered after we've passed that resolution on the pandemic pay, if that sounds like a plan to start with. So, all right, so the first thing, this is day 2 for us in our community feeding program. Our nutrition services department has done just an absolutely unbelievable job Our district level and building level admin team have stepped up to help us as we go through that distribution process. We've got a couple people on the line that will help bring us up to speed on where we're at. So I'm going to turn it over to Chase, and I think he's going to turn it over to Allison after that. So Chase, you want to start out?
Sure. Good evening, board members. It's nice to be with you even virtually this evening. As Steve said, this is day 2, and we think it's been very positive so far. As we talked about last week, the health and safety of our employees as well as our students and our families is our top priority. And with that comes feeding our kids. And so one of the first things that we started looking at last week and made sure we had operational for today was our food program. We did launch yesterday at 7 school sites, as well as visiting 4 of our mobile home communities. We were able to serve 631 students yesterday through that process, which equates to us serving just over 1,200 meals. Today, that number, we saw nearly a 33% increase as we were able to serve over 900 students today, which again equates to over 1,800 meals. We've continued
That's
to
great.
ramp. Thank you. And actually, kudos to, and I was going to come back to this, but kudos to Allison, who I'll ask her to add anything if she wants to in a minute, and her team. They have been tremendous. Our food service folks were willing, happy, and ready to jump in and do what needed to be done. We had the production kitchens open early yesterday morning at 7 o'clock. And then along with our administrators, those individuals were out there in the cold and some ending snow yesterday morning and all bundled up to make sure they were there with smiles to feed our families. For a comparison bar for our school district, we do a summer feeding program across the district. We use a similar number of sites. They are some the same sites, some different locations. And on average, we feed about 500 kids a day. And so as you look at yesterday's numbers being roughly 20% higher than that, just over 600, and then today's numbers being almost double what our normal summer feed numbers are, we think we're trending in the right direction. However, when we talk about feeding children, we can always feed more. You might have noticed last night that you received a call from Superintendent Rowley reminding families about the feed locations. Tonight, we're going to personalize that even more with reminders from our principals in the way of a Blackboard Connect to their families. Again, we think that this is a needed service that the district can provide, and we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to feed as many students as possible in the community. The one other thing I will touch on before I turn it over to Allison and then we take questions is we've gotten a lot of inquiries and offers of support from private restaurants and other community organizations to help us with feeding kids. And so Creed Frank has been helping us to spearhead some of the work that they can do. And really where we're trying to point that part of our community is to help provide meals in the evening or on the weekends. So that is not to compete with our food program, but to make sure that we're providing options, not just at lunchtime, but at other parts of the day. And that's something we can talk about a little bit more, but I wanted to mention it before I forgot it. As I turn it over to Allison, again, I cannot say enough great things about the work her and her team are doing. They put in many, many hours when many were supposed to be on spring break last week and over last weekend to get ready so that we had food ready for kids yesterday. Allison, anything you'd like to add on this for us?
Good evening. Thanks, Chase. I think we're doing a good job. It was a bit of an unknown when we got started as far as how many kids would come out to dine with us. And I think all of the district efforts to put that call out has helped. We saw that big increase today, and we are optimistic that we'll continue to see increases as we go through the week. We are continuing to evaluate our locations, and Esme Davis has been a big help in coordinating our outreach to mobile home parks. We currently, as of yesterday, we did 4. Today we did 5. Tomorrow we'll do 6. And those numbers have been increasing for the most part. So we're glad that we've had that opportunity to serve those possibly isolated families that don't have transportation. So we're continuing to evaluate the needs throughout the district and the community and respond to those needs. The nutrition team stepped up and heeded the call when we asked for help. I can tell you that I do appreciate, and I know the team appreciates the support they've been given in terms of that additional pay. That was huge for a lot of my staff. So I want to thank everyone for that. That's much appreciated.
That's our brief summary, but we're happy to answer questions that board members might have.
I don't have a question really, but I did take the kids to the City High drive-through yesterday.
Great.
Just to kind of, are you seeing that the deliveries when you're going out to the mobile homes or whatnot have been more popular than the drive-throughs, or is it a mix?
I think it's been a mix. Our numbers went up today. Probably the biggest increase was at West High, where I was at. We did over double today what we did yesterday. But I think, the mobile home parks have been in the 25 to 60 meal range. West High was our highest today at 150 meals served. Surprisingly to me, North Central has been our second highest performer at 135 today, followed by Northwest at 110. I wouldn't have guessed, and City is at 106. I mean, if you compare that to our free and reduced percentages in those areas, I would not have guessed that North Central would have been our second highest number of meals served.
I would add to that as we look at that and try to figure out what that means is we also have more sites in the east and the southern tiers of the district. And so we look at those high numbers at North Central. We don't really have another site up there, and the numbers at Northwest, we don't have as many sites around the Coral area as we do in some other areas of the district. And so I think we need to continue to look at those things, and that's what we mean when we say we evaluate where we are placing the grab and go locations.
And just to be clear, the grab and go is open to any of our students and not necessarily just our free and reduced. So it could be that we're seeing families that just didn't budget it to have kids home during the day, needing snacks. And so this is really huge for all of our families.
And actually, yes, Ruthie, and actually it's wider than that. We don't ask for an address, identification, any sort of information. And so, yes, not only is it open to all of our kids, it's open to any child age 1 to 18 that wants to come to our site. Are you staying with your aunt or your grandparents in the area, but you go to school somewhere else? That does not matter.
Okay.
We will give those kids a lunch. And so that's a great point. And I think that's part of the message. Some of the feedback we got the first day was, I think it speaks to our community, said, well, we don't want to take a lunch from somebody else. And so we're trying to get that message out there. No, this is for everybody. And we're not going to limit that. The limits are what the federal government puts on us between the ages of 1 and 18, that the child has to actually be there. I know that's a hurdle. It's one, unfortunately, we cannot waive. But yes, it's open to everyone.
I was going to ask about that. I couldn't help but notice the Gazette article that Cedar Rapids passed out 3,500 meals on Monday. And I know that they have about 2,000 more students in Cedar Rapids than we do, but it does seem that they are passing out a higher number of lunches and breakfasts than we are. And have we looked at, is that a messaging failure on our part that people think you have to be qualified for FRL to get this, or what's going on?
First, kudos to our colleagues in Cedar Rapids. I think that we're all in this together. And so the more kids that we can feed across the corridor, the state and the nation, the better. Allison's going to reach out to her counterpart up there and try to see some of their strategies so that we can borrow those. To your point, Lisa, we want to make sure that we are providing the message as clearly as often as possible and to as many people. As I reviewed the documents they put out, and they're very similar to the things that we've been sharing in terms of the messaging. And I think that's one reason you saw us add the call last night, adding the call again this evening, is because we do recognize that folks have to know about it in order to actually participate in it. And so we want to try to continue to do those pieces. But I don't have a really specific, answer to your question, but that we do just need to continue to get the word out about it, and also try to connect with our friends in Cedar Rapids. I think that Allison might want to add something, but other than that, I'll just I'll leave that there unless you have a follow-up question for me on that piece or comment. Okay.
And maybe one of the things that, just as a reminder, is that the number of meals we served is about twice as many as we normally serve during our summer program. And so clearly we're accessing those people that normally rely on us for food during non-school times. And so one of our conversations that we had today was a supposition that we may see a slow, steady uptrend of people who come to the sites, not just due to the additional messaging that comes out from the building, but due to the fact that we may have a larger proportion of people that may rely on other food service assistance in town. And as things move forward and perhaps fewer of those are available, we may become a site of first choice where right now we may not be.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that it's really hard to look at one data point of Cedar Rapids and then make assumptions off of it. And for example, maybe their summer feed, they feed 3,000 kids every day during summer feed. And so this is just something that parents up there are used to doing. And so that could very well explain that. And I saw that we are way above summer feed numbers. And so I do not mean to be critical at all. I think that it's outstanding numbers and what we're doing so far in the district. I just wanted to know if Cedar Rapids had some secret code that they had cracked that we could borrow.
No, I think that, the point is well taken. I have to admit, when I saw those numbers last night, I texted Allison immediately. I talked to the team. I was like, okay, we can, we're doing great, but we can do more. Like I said, we're all in this together. And so I'm really happy that they serve that many. And, I want to make sure that we are utilizing different resources, that they're using different resources so that we can serve more here. But, we also do see it as a real positive. And so I appreciate the comment about the summer feed, because we're doing good things for kids. We just want to make sure that we're doing them for as many as absolutely possible.
Can I add something real quick? Is that okay? That I've been in contact with Raphael from Center for Worker Justice, who was explaining that a lot of our predominantly Spanish only speaking families don't look at the English media. So they're not the communications that we're putting out. They kind of have to take another layer to kind of help it get to that population, and they're doing that. So I think, as the week progresses, we'll see more and more. But I know that was something that I didn't realize initially, that, within that community is kind of more known. And so we have people who understand that, and they're helping to get the word out.
That's great.
Maybe if I could just add to that too, I had a nice conversation with Raphael, and one of the concerns that's out there, we're not seeing it here in Iowa City and perhaps not in Iowa, but he had multiple examples of places where ICE has been coming to mobile food sites. And so we had a conversation about how that worked both on our property and when we're delivering off site, because he did have a concern that in the non-English speaking community, that there's a significant concern that if they come to one of our collection sites, that they may wind up being subject to interaction or interdiction by ICE. And so we had a long conversation about the role of ICE on our property. And that was one of the things, to Laura's point, that's one of the things that he wants to make sure to get out to that community so they understand how that works.
Yeah.
Steve, I want to thank you and everyone else who was involved in dealing with that issue. I know it was a concern that I had heard about earlier too. I just want to really commend all of you for increasing the number of sites. I think that's a great thing. And I did have a question. Is it possible to reach the building principals by their regular phone number while we're doing this, so they can are easily accessible to people to answer questions?
I don't know if Adams on the line, but Charlie, you're kind of asking, is there a way to, even though they're not in the buildings, to still have the principals have access to their building number?
Right, yeah, because when people ask me to, if they have questions, I oftentimes refer them to the principal, and it occurred to me that maybe the principals aren't really easily contacted now.
I can just jump in for a quick minute because I know I was on an earlier email chain with the building administrators. Their voicemail is still active and they're still collecting voicemail remotely. So if anyone happens to call any one of our schools, that'll go to voicemail, and then the secretary and the building principal can access those. So they do have that opportunity to pick those up and then get back to them. And then another piece that was out on that elementary principal group discussion was accessing language line. So they have that opportunity then, depending on the language of the person that contacts the school, to reach out to them and to work through language line to ensure that they've got the translation so that they can have appropriate communication.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, I'm trying to leave the right pauses in there. So if we don't have any more questions on nutrition, I'm going to shift over to teaching and learning. So we had a webinar with the DE today, and while that's maybe not directly relevant to the conversation that Amy, Matt, and Diane are going to have with you here in just a moment, I did want to share with you that they are now going to move to twice a week webinars with the DE. They recognize that this is a constantly shifting landscape, and that unfortunately we are besieging them with questions. They are doing their best to try to keep up with them. And those questions are centered around everything from our lunch sites and content that we're allowable to push out from an academic standpoint, interaction with our ELL and special ed kids, childcare. So it's a plethora of issues that they cover on these webinars. And I just wanted to share with you that we anticipate that we'll be getting bi-weekly updates from them moving forward. And we'll certainly keep you up to speed on those as they come through. We did spend quite a bit of time today talking about teaching and learning and those things that we are and aren't allowed to do. And just before our crew kicks it off, one of the things that they mentioned multiple times on the webinar today was just a reminder that at this point in time, education in Iowa is not compulsory. And that because of that, that changes the landscape for how we reach out to parents and students and how we connect them with the classroom and our teachers. And they reminded us that that has implications for everything from our concurrent classes that we offer right down through kindergartners. So quite a bit of conversation on that. And again, guidance coming out literally almost daily from the DE that changes the landscape and how we're able to roll out resources for students and staff. But we've been spending time today thanking people for the incredible work that they're doing. So in advance, I'm gonna thank these three, and I'm sure they're gonna thank many others as it cascades down the line. But if you did not have a chance to see shortly before the board meeting came out, there was an email pushed out to you that also went to all parents. It went to staff yesterday. So some of you may have received it secondhand in your household. But went out to all parents throughout the community today, and a wealth of resources available to them. And Amy and Matt and Diane are going to walk you through that.
Thanks, Steve. Like Steve said, he kind of talked about our tiered communication that we've tried to do here with some of the teach and learning resources, and just to kind of follow his lead there on the thank yous, I'd really want to take some time spend some time thanking Diane and Adam for their work and their leadership in this area on several levels about getting this list curated and put together as far as the resources go, and then problem solving the access piece, and for some of the considerations for our families that'll need access, elementary or secondary wise, for either devices that were left at school, or for elementary kiddos that don't have that access at home. We'll be getting some devices in their hands soon based on those forms that you saw go out in our communications. And just to circle back on that one point around those communications going out, if we do have families or students that have that PowerSchool indicator checked, those do get translated for them in Spanish when they come out to them. We have recognized that not everybody has that, and so that's why we continue to work on translation efforts and things like that. But there are those Spanish communications that would go out to families that have that checked in that Power School, just for both whether it's meals or whether it's something like this on the teach and learning end. To continue with the thank yous, I think this is appropriate that we should also recognize our teacher librarians put a lot of effort into this resource list for us as well over the course of time. Even before we were going to break, we already had people scrambling together and putting this thing together and trying to develop it. And so I think all said, when we look at the leadership we had from our administrative team, from some of the teachers, and then even the association, Brady's been critical for us in this work, and his communication with his colleagues and his time that he spent on trying to put these resources together and help us with communication has been invaluable. So it's been really a total team effort to get this thing put together. And when we look at I think the weight of the things we've been able to put together in a short amount of time, not just on the teaching and learning side, on the operation side too, with whether it's the pay or whether it's the meal piece we talked about, it was a sizable task. And I think we've set a pretty good course here for us to go with. So I think just to come back to those communication pieces again, just to review them, and then I'll let Amy or Diane jump in before we take any questions. But you saw last night the information that went out to teachers about some of the expectations for them, or kind of guidelines or things we'd like to see them try to do. I think most importantly, we want to recognize that, just trying to connect with their families this week is a big piece. And that was one of the first things we wanted to make sure they saw from us and heard from us, was that, it's really that value and connection from not having that time off in spring break, and then knowing we're going to have some additional time here, all the way then down to the class resources and some of the things that they could start to provide. The district has the resource page, but then of course some teachers will be able to pull things together to distribute with their families and with their classes as well. And then today you actually saw that resource list go out to parents. We followed up again and reminded them about the access portion that went out yesterday, that if they need access at home, there was that form linked to the communication that went out today. So they saw the resources for the first time today, and then were reminded of the access piece again. So really with those two sets of things, I'm not going to walk you through all the documents and explain all the pieces to you there, because there's a lot of content in there. There's a lot of content for our staff yesterday. There's a lot of content from parents. But we felt it was important to do this as quick as we could, but also the right way. And that was something we wanted to make sure we did, and that we accounted for access for all kids from an equity standpoint, from a FAPE standpoint, from all of those pieces. So I guess, Amy or Diane, what am I leaving out in the high level overview there?
I'll jump in real quick, just to reiterate that and really kind of pinpoint us back even a step further, that all of this has been really purposefully staged. So if you think about how we're trickling information out to our parents, we started with the food distribution and the medication pickup. And now you see, just as last night with the device piece, a mention of that again today with the resources having gone out. So I would just echo everything that Matt shared with the amount of people that have been working on this side. Brady, of course, those that Matt's already shared. Lisa Glenn, has been critical as we understand what we need to be thinking about in the way of special education and how this needs to unfold really purposefully and carefully, so that we understand what all students deserve in this circumstance, in this uncharted territory. Don't think that Matt necessarily mentioned the curriculum coordinators that Diane's been reaching out to, or elementary teacher leaders. It's just been a phenomenal lift with a lot of people. And I would say that all the while that the guidance has been changing on us as well. So while we get a bit of state guidance issued to us, a couple days later, then the feds are sharing something different. So it's trying to keep up with that, navigate through that steady stream of information that's just seems to be coming at us constantly. But without further ado, I'll send it over to Diane and Adam and Lisa.
Sure. I'll take it for a couple minutes here. One more shout out too, I think, is Adam's team. So the Tech and Innovation team has been really working hand in hand with the coordinators and the teachers, librarians, to make sure that we're providing information to parents as to how they're going to be able to access these online resources. So we continue to kind of try to navigate the line between instruction and providing resources. So we know from the DE that we're safe to provide optional resources for our students, but we can't require any work or grade any work or give credit for any work. The couple exceptions to that, and that's some of the guidance that we're getting from the DE today. So there are a few exceptions for students who are taking college credit courses. So our high school students who are currently enrolled in courses through the University of Iowa that take those on campus are continuing those courses through those professors through an online format. Our kids who are taking courses through Kirkwood Community College that we're taking those on campus, so maybe through an academy or through alternate concurrent, they are also continuing those courses through an online format. And then the one that we're just working out right now are the courses, they're called concurrent courses. They're the ones that our kids take on our site by our teachers, but that also earn them Kirkwood credit. So we are working right now with Kirkwood, with our teachers, and trying to help them get ready to be able to actually provide instruction for just those concurrent courses so that the students who are enrolled in those can continue to get college credit for those courses. So we are treating those differently than we are our regular high school courses. So
Adam, do you want to make a comment just maybe about some of the piece, just a real brief comment there about what we're collecting for information, and then kind of what you're seeing come in via traffic on that?
Yeah, so you likely saw last night that we sent forms out to all families in the district with messaging regarding device availability and also availability of internet service for the home, with request forms for each. Also phone numbers that they can call into to make those requests. Our staff has been handling that today. We've had a lot of traffic with that. To this point, we have about just under 500 requests for devices and about 80 requests for home internet service, which actually aligns really well, both in terms of the ratio between those two and with, what our expectations were for numbers. At this point, we are comfortable that we more than prepared for that volume. So we've started reaching out this morning to families to arrange device pickups. Those will happen at the same sites, wherever possible, will happen at the same sites as the food pickups. We may have some families who are in a situation where they cannot get to those sites, in which case we'll explore some alternatives for getting them their devices. But we wanted to make that as easy as possible, and we think that using those same sites as nutrition will allow us to do that. So good demand at this point. Our help desk has been busy all day responding to those, and we anticipate that continuing, through early next week. But, everybody on the team has stepped up. I think they're excited to be helping out, and so I think it's going well so far.
So I think from there, that's kind of our overview of what we've done. And, I would say the work's not going to stop is the thing I'd let you know. I think this is kind of like the first step. We have a lot of teachers that will be collaborating with their building principals, with teacher teams, even the AP group of teachers. I know Brady's already led some efforts to try to get them collaborating to be talking about that. And so we really kind of see it as the beginning and the stepping off point here. And we know that teachers and teams will continue to be engaged as much as they can be over this time. And, because the reality is we want to have a good product out there. We want to have resources out there. We want to have opportunities for kids with that way, but also trying to realize the situation we're in and balance that connection piece along with trying to continue their learning all the while. So I think we'll take questions you have from there, unless you guys think I'm forgetting something we wanted to highlight.
If I could just jump in for a minute, one thing I think is really important for us to recognize, and when we've been on our calls, whether it's with our exec team, our cabinet team, or admin council team, we're starting every meeting with a check-in just to make sure that we're keeping track of the social emotional standpoint of the folks in the district that are working so hard on these efforts. And if you haven't had a chance to drill down into the pages and pages of resources here, I definitely commend you to that. And I would in particular draw your attention at the end of each of the elementary level grade bands. There is a social emotional component in there because recognizing that we want to keep our kids academically engaged, but also recognizing that we've got kids and parents that are doing their best to assist from the community standpoint of self-isolation, and they're cooped up at home, and we want to make sure that not only do they have the opportunity to stay academically engaged, but that we also want to make sure that they're healthy from a social emotional standpoint. So in that kudos department, our team did an amazing job with some things that require zero technology at all. I'm looking at the second grade or the first grade list right now, and it's talking about coloring and playing games and blowing bubbles and getting a chance to play outside on a day where there's actually some sunshine, and painting kindness rocks and placing them around the neighborhood for others to find, cooking together, talking about feelings and how different emotions make our bodies feel differently. And so that's just one example of the fact that the team really has looked beyond that academic component, which we know is so important, but recognize that our responsibility is to educate the whole child. And I really think they've done an amazing job making sure that those resources are there, and that those starters are there for parents when they're at home and they're saying, what do I do next? Here's some great examples for you.
Yeah, I will just attest to that. I did go through the junior high, having a 14-year-old at home, and I was really happy to see that I could tell him to go do some squats and some push-ups and to get out of his chair and do something. He got his instrument out. He started playing, the clarinet for a little bit, and I mean, I just would echo that the diversity of the recommended and ideas for engaging students. I didn't look at everything, but I did go through the junior high one, and it was really, I found to be very impressive. So just echo all of the thank yous. And also, Steve, you mentioned the social emotional aspects of our staff. And I was thinking about that because all of us are facing a ton of anxiety, and just if you pick up the news and anything you read is just, it weighs on all of us. And so taking the time to take care of our team members and making sure they're doing okay, and kind of pacing ourselves, because this is day 2 of 3 weeks, right? And I don't know this, who knows, it may go longer depending on what our governor decides to do or other forces. So pacing ourselves, taking care of ourselves, and saying thank you a lot, being kind and generous, good intent, all of that just goes a really, really long way. So I thought the resources were fantastic, and I appreciate all the effort that went into that, as well as the food, as well as the technology, and as well as just all of the careful consideration and the sequencing and the daily messaging. I've had lots and lots of feedback that the daily touch base, and sometimes it's not even a lot of new information. Sometimes it is, but just we're checking in, here's what's new, here's what we're going to reiterate because it's so important. I just think it's set up a really good communication cadence. And I know it doesn't happen by magic. It's just a lot of folks doing really, really hard, good work. And so just want to say thank you again.
Janet, I would add one piece on that employee health and well-being. So I appreciate you mentioning it. One thing we did send out in communication a couple of days ago, and we will continue to remind our employees, is that our employee assistance program is still available. And as you said, our well-being is still important, especially when we don't get to see each other on a daily basis. And so I think it's a good reminder that there are still resources out there that we're going to provide as a district, even if we might not be able to hand them into somebody. And so I thank you for mentioning that to allow me to remind me to say that about our employee assistance program. That's something we will continue to share with our staff as we move forward.
That's good. Thank you. Charlie, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to really thank you for bringing, for expressing all of that, Janet. I'm sure it's on in all of our minds too. I would ask, but then, I have all these nitpicky questions, sorry. For one thing, for Adam or Steve, the home internet request form, I couldn't get that to translate using the language translation service when I accessed it over the website. May have been my fault, but I'm not sure if that's happening or not. Just ask you to check into that. And then, do we have an idea yet of how close we're getting to 100% device access and internet access for students in the district? Is it 95% now, or where do you think we are in terms of our overall percentage access?
I can speak to that a little bit. So we do surveys each year that address availability of both home computing and home internet resources. and we address them at the secondary level through the one-to-one program and the take-home hotspot program that we have there. At the elementary level, based upon our numbers, we believe that we have about 700 students who lack computer access in the home. Now, many of those kids are going to be multiple kids in a single household. And it may be, even though parents could request a device for each child, they may not be in every case. So once we fulfill the 500 requests we have for devices right now, again, according to our numbers, I would expect that we have, pretty close to all, but about 200 kids, which I think is about 3% of our district population that will have devices in their hand. Hopefully those numbers will continue to rise over the coming days. In terms of home internet, we see that around 94% of our families report that they have access to home internet already. So we would expect the number of requests for internet to continue to rise. I would be surprised if we end up with a number above about 200 or 250, again, based upon the numbers that we have as a district and knowing that we already provide to secondary families that don't have home internet.
Thanks, Adam. And Adam, could you say if like a SFA or a teacher wants knows that a family needs internet or a device, they can work with the IT folks to get that?
Absolutely. Yep. And we've already done that in a couple of cases.
Okay. Thanks very much.
So I've got a couple questions for our teaching and learning folks. I know stuff's changing all the time, and I was just wondering, how forward thinking are we if all of a sudden we're going to go online at the end of the year, or we're not going to be in classes for a whole rest of the year, or all these different things that may or may not happen. How much are we preparing for some of those contingencies?
I'll jump in
Hello,
before just share the DE today on their webinar. That was one of the topics of conversation that came up. And they have a task force that is going to convene here in the next day or two that is designed to tackle the role of online learning if we're unable to return to regular classrooms. We anticipate that we're going to get a much more robust input from the Department of Ed here in the next couple of weeks as that task force actually ramps up and addresses some of the issues. In the meantime, I'll let our folks talk about the work that is already underway here we call them those what if scenarios. So Matt, Amy, Diane, Adam, I'll let you guys have at it.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Sean, and I think that's how we tried to approach this. So while we felt a lot of urgency around what we needed to put out and how soon we needed to communicate to families, in a couple of scenarios, we did want to try to remind people we were on spring break, right? And now we're in day 2 of the missed day of instruction, and still wanted to get things out as soon as we could, but also planning for a scenario that we don't know if it's a 3-week scenario or is this an end of the year scenario. So the things we wanted to put out, we wanted to make sure could be sustained, and that would also help to potentially address some of those questions in a long-term capacity, and that it could be connected to some of the things students would be familiar with, and that's why we tried to stage some of those pieces, and why we think the access conversation is an important one, that if we have to problem solve for a longer period of time here. So I think we've tried to position ourselves to continue to answer those questions as they come up. I think that's the best case, or the best way I can say it to you. I'm not going to pretend that we have all the answers to all those questions about what happens to grades or what happens towards some of those end of the year scenarios. That's what we'll continue to work on. But we had to set this initial piece up such that if we have to maintain this as part of the solution, that we're positioned to do that this isn't just a 3-week solution for us, that this can be a longer term solution if it needs to be. We don't want that to happen. We'd love to be back in school. We want to be doing what we're good at, and that's with the kids in the schools and with our teachers in front of them. But if we get there, I'm confident that with the things we're doing now are going to set us up for those if we get into a longer term scenario. I don't know, Amy, if you have something to add to that.
Yeah, I would add that it's heartening to hear from the DE today that they're taking that next step to bring that group together to look at that. A couple of weeks ago, we had the thought that we might have the flexibility in Iowa Code to start doing some of that ourselves. Adam specifically to a couple members at the DE, citing some of that code, and at this time they were sharing that we don't have a waiver on file to do that sort of thing. So you can even see how fast, even within a 2-week period, that the DE is moving on this, just based on that earlier conversation to see what they're trying to consider moving forward. So Adam, you want to jump in and share a little bit?
Yeah, I would just share, again, like Matt said, really establishing the access piece as, a backbone to this. A lot of the work that we put in has been conceptualized around sort of a continuum of possibilities based upon the guidance we're getting from the DE. And as we've worked to implement, whether it's the resources that are being shared out with families for activities, resources for kids to take part in. All of those have been designed along with some other pieces that we're still working on, still developing, designed with a mind on, potentially keeping this going for a longer period of time and potentially ramping it up, again, based upon guidance we get.
I would just like to say here too that reading the material that you've been assembling and asking us to look at about requirements from the federal and state governments, as well as our own policies and practices, it seems to me that providing special education is something that I'm totally not confident that even with all of your great work, we're going to be able to do very well remotely. So I'd just like to mention to the board that in terms of priorities for asking you to devote your time and effort to, my thinking is that if it looks like we're going to have to be doing remote teaching for a longer period of time, that we should have high priority for understanding how to do special education when kids are not in a classroom.
And Lisa, maybe you could jump in here just a little bit with some of the work. That's where we spent a lot of time, I would say, the last few days, Charlie, because you're exactly right. That is a high priority for us, and it is something that we want to make sure that we are able to deliver on, because this is for all kids. And so these opportunities are for all kids. So Lisa, if you could maybe just jump in and give a high-level overview of some of the work you've done here over the course of the last couple of weeks, and then maybe we can address some questions based off that.
Yes. So, whatever we do in special education always starts with what are we doing in general education. And we always want to provide, our first order of business is to provide access to whatever it is that everyone else has access to. So at this point in time, that is what our efforts have been mostly focused on, is figuring out of what it is we're providing for everyone else, which is some enrichment type opportunities right at the moment. How do we increase access for our students with disabilities to all of those resources that you see on that list? So special ed teachers have received some direction to be contacting families, some direction about when IEP meetings, what to do about IEP meetings that needed to be scheduled in the next few weeks, some different scenarios that could have been underway with IEP meetings in the next few weeks, and how to manage the procedural parts of special education while we're not having school. But essentially our instructional program for all students is on hold at this point in time. So our instructional program for students with IEPs is also on hold, although we are providing some enrichment opportunities. So we want to provide some enrichment opportunities for students with IEPs too. So we do have some students that most students can access some of the things on that resource list that you see, but there probably are some students who can't access a whole lot of that. So our team right now is looking for other solutions for some students who have some very special considerations, and so our special ed teachers can push those out to families of those particular students so they can remain engaged in in enrichment type activities also. So that's where we are. If we were to go with, you know, an online type program for the whole district, then that is when we look at specially designed instruction, you know, and how would we deliver that for students with IEPs, which we already have some solutions for that. And we're previewing others now in preparation for if we would ever need that.
Thank you, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on the instructional materials? Hearing none.
Our last one is our personnel issue with compensation. And we do have a resolution that does need your attention, but I would ask Chase for a quick summary of that before we move it into an action.
Sure. Thank you, Steve, and good evening again. At the meeting last week, we talked about the board's plan to pay all employees their regular rates of pay through the time that school was closed. That's something that we had already put out. Over the last week, as we've talked with some of our colleagues around the state, there's a recommendation that would be good, since this is our classified staff and do not technically have contracts like our certified staff, that the board approve such a resolution. That is the resolution you see before you this evening. That first portion really just solidifies that conversation that we had last week. The second part of that resolution is something that we developed somewhat based on some of the feedback that we received from you all in our conversation last week, and looking at ways to support some of our employees. And so what we've requested and what we would like to do is provide what we're calling a $10 pandemic pay stipend to any of our non-exempt classified staff that are asked to come in and help perform critical or crucial functions for the school district over the next 3 weeks. You will see that this does sunset on April 12th. Again, that's kind of some of the guidance we've been given, that we should bring this back to the board periodically for discussion for you, which I think is a good idea. As Allison mentioned, this is one of those things that one of the building blocks for this was looking at our food service employees, for an example, individuals that find themselves as some of the lowest paid in our organization, but yet we're asking them to go out and work on a daily basis in the community, as many people hunker down because of the seriousness of the concerns. And we were looking for ways that we felt that would show our support for these individuals and what we're asking them to do in our community's time of need. And so, as a little bit of background, we have 5 negotiated groups and 2 additional groups of employees that we look at as meet and confer. Our teachers, our paras, our facilities, our school year secretaries, and our nutrition services, and then our administrators and our year-round support staff on the meet and confer side. Then on top of that, we also have to take into consideration state law, federal law, one of the most pressing being the Fair Labor Standards Act. So as we looked at all those different factors, looked at ways that we felt we could most fairly, most equitably support a portion of our employee base, we came up with this this language that you see in front of you, which provides this opportunity again to our non-exempt classified staff, basically those that use our Time Clock Plus system, if you're familiar with that, and giving them the ability to receive this $10 an hour pandemic pay for hours worked over the next 3 weeks. That's the backdrop on it. We're happy to answer any questions, and I'll allow Nick and Jeremy and Leslie, who have also worked very closely in our entire team in HR, business services, and payroll on this, have those 3 chime in with anything and help answer questions as well.
Chase, just want to add here, this isn't directly addressable at this point for this action, but I have received correspondence again asking about the school bus drivers are going to get their regular pay during the.
Thank you, Charlie. Happy to answer that. And yes, they are. We continue to work with the bus company and are in agreement with the bus company that we will pay no less than the portion of that service contract to ensure that the bus drivers get their regular pay as the rest of our contracted employees during this time.
Okay, thanks.
So if there's no other questions, Jen, I think that we would like, and sorry, not trying to rush it along, but.
No. I was just getting ready to jump into it. I didn't know there were other comments besides yours, Chase. Appreciate the overview. And from my perspective, I appreciate the thoughtfulness in providing this pandemic pay folks that are coming in and kind of doing this extra duty, right, in these kinds of conditions. And so just a question, I'm assuming, we've got budgetary coverage for this just to make sure that we're covered from that standpoint. And that's the only question I have. And provided the answer is yes, then I personally support this direction. And I think it says a lot about our district that we're taking these kinds of steps.
So the short answer on that is yes. If there comes a time where you'd like some more detail as we start recording these hours, Les and I can definitely work to bring that back. And well, the only thing I was going to reiterate is to remember not to start with this is that this is on top of regular pay, that we are paying every employee in the district that their regular pay, which I think is a good thing as well. So I thank the board for your support of our employees, and that's huge. Nick told me that last count, there were less than 50 districts in the state that committed to doing that. So we appreciate your support in helping us take care of our colleagues and our employees.
And I was just going to add to that, Chase, actually, when we had collected kind of our UEN or larger group that through Jeremy and I are part of this with the HR directors across the state. And I would say just in general, the treatment and the care for our employees that's provided. I mean, in addition to the pandemic pay, just in the general, how we're approaching this situation is something that I think we should all be proud of. And I think hopefully everyone sees that and appreciates that, because as we look to other districts around, it's not the same situation for everyone. So just wanted to share that piece as well.
And if I could jump in real quick as well, directors, this is Les, but for example, we are not changing anything related to employee benefits as well. So in addition to them being paid, all benefits remain fully in force. The primary concern for most people this time would be their health insurance. And we brought to you a couple of items in the last couple of months, switching to Wellmark as our third-party administrator for our health plan on April 1, which falls right in the middle of this situation. That process is moving along as best as I can tell, exactly as it was planned out in February when we made the decision. All of the timelines have been met to date. New cards have been sent out to the employees last Friday, so they should start to receive those in their box, so they're available to them on April 1. And so we're including that in our communication to our employees in the questions and answers that we're providing to them, that all of these benefits are continuing as well. And I think that's pretty important as a side piece, that they don't have that drain on their families, either emotionally or financially.
Hey, Les, on those new insurance cards, you said they were being sent out to employees. Are they being sent to their homes or to the?
Paul, good question. Generally, whenever you do a transition like this, cards are always sent to their home address, and we are doing that as well. So, yeah, you should be seeing one at your house pretty soon. They expect them to start to arrive around the 25th. So, that's tomorrow. So hopefully, people will start to respond that they get them. But it's key to remember that they're not effective until April 1. So that would probably be the only caveat.
Yeah, I was just making sure that it was clarified, because we have a certain number of teachers that can't go into the building. So I just want to make sure that they were going to their household.
I have a question. My only concern with this was that the $10 an hour wasn't enough, given kind of what we're asking some people to do. But am I to understand Nick's comments that it's $10 on top of what they're already getting, what their salary rate already was going to be?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, hold on. Sorry, we talked through this a little bit as an internal team, so it can be confusing. We are not. If an employee makes $15 an hour, and we ask, and that's in line with what some of our food service make and some others, they'll receive that $15 an hour, and then in line with everybody else in the district's being paid. And then they'll clock the hours over the next 3 weeks. And for every one of those hours clocked, they'll receive an additional $10. It's not that they are going to receive their flat rate of pay and then $15 plus $10 for every hour worked over the next 3 weeks, if that makes sense.
Is it like a hazard pay type of stipend?
Yeah, we're calling it pandemic pay since that's the circumstance. Yes.
Any other questions from directors or any other comments from Chase or your team or the team? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the pandemic pay resolution for hourly non-exempt employees?
I move that we approve the pandemic pay resolution for hourly and non-exempt employees.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open.
And I'm voting yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Awesome. Fantastic. Really, really good news. Thank you all so much. I want to take us back to the meal program. Allison has some additional information regarding the Cedar Rapids activity. So Allison, do you want to jump in on that with some more information?
Thank you. I heard back from my Cedar Rapids counterpart, the director there. And so when they report 3,000, that is 1,500 breakfast and 1,500 lunch. So by those standards, we said yesterday we served about 630 meals. So we would double that. So we would be the 1,260 range compared to their 3,000. And today she said they went up again. They were about 2,000 compared to our 940. So closer than it would have appeared at that first look, because they were taking that. They're also serving breakfast and lunch. They were just counting them each, where we serve them together just like they're doing, but we were just counting that as one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, we're by half compared to that.
Yeah. Yes. And they have 9 sites compared to our 7, and they're not delivering any meals. So I do think comparatively, we're matching what they're doing for comparison.
That's great. That's super helpful. Thank you, Allison.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Paul, you've got a couple things you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, just clarification. Adam, can you tell me again what the number of requests for computers were and the number of hotspot requests? And then also, Allison, can you tell me how many meals you actually made and then what happens to that food that we're not using?
Sure. So we really overproduced yesterday because we didn't know. So for comparison, we serve anywhere from 8,500 to 9,000 meals a day when school is in session. And Chase has mentioned previously, summer is more around that 500 range. But given the fact that people seem so nervous about food supply, or at least toilet paper, right? We wanted to make sure that we were geared up to meet the demand because we didn't want to run out. So we actually produced almost 3,700 meals yesterday. And so we are using those. They're all fine. And we are able to serve those, and we'll continue to serve those this week. until we run out. Anything that we would have left, we have been reaching out to community partners, table to table, and some other areas like that for donations if we would need to donate anything.
And to your other question, Paul, we are at about just under 500 requests for devices and about 80 requests for home internet access.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Anything else on the district's response to COVID-19 that we want to cover tonight? This has been extremely helpful, and the level of information and the commitment and the care. Again, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. We are making a big difference in this district as we work through this set of conditions together, and it really does speak volumes about how we've come together and we're supporting each other through the process. So I just do want to say thank you one more time. We can't say thank you enough right now. I think that's impossible. So I'll ask directors one more time. Is there anything else you'd like to pose to the team around our COVID-19 response? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to our action items for tonight. The first action item is a PEPL Lifecycle Budget for FY 2021. Any comments or questions? Les, anything you want to highlight in this? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the PEPL Lifecycle Budget for FY 2020-21?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open.
I'm voting yes.
You. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is a resolution to set the hearing date for the sale disposal of school property at Longfellow Elementary. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Kim, we're ready to vote.
Bear with me just 1 second here.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, was it Charlie and who else? Who was the second?
Ruthina.
Thank you very much. Online voting is open.
I'm voting yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Finally, we have a recommendation to approve the superintendent recommendation for the FY 21 budget and to set the date of April 14th, 2020 at 6 p.m. for the budget hearing. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Jan, I just would like to ask the staff to consider if we need to consider in this budget cycle possible increases in cost for providing special education next year if it turns out that we cannot have school in buildings for part of the year or all of the year. I don't know if there is or not, but I think that's something I would just like to ask the staff to give us some opinion on when we actually approve this budget, I think in April.
Charlie, I can give you a quick update on that. We're very fortunate here in Iowa in terms of a funding process for special education. So we have the ability to expend funds that are allocated to us by the state, but then we have the ability to continue to expend the funds that we believe are necessary to meet the needs of each individual student based on their IEP. And then on an annual basis, we're able to go back to the state for that actual cost and an allowed cost under the state budget and petition for relief through the SBRC. And in 10 years that I've been here, we've never had any issues of significance with the SBRC when we've gone to them to petition for that relief. And so the real benefit for us is that we're able to ensure that we meet all the needs of our students that qualify for special education services without having to consider reductions in our general fund budget in order to meet their needs. So the plus for us in that case is that as the environment changes for us and as the education landscape changes here in the next couple of weeks or months or even in the next fall, we'll have the ability to meet their needs and then go back and petition for that redress through SBRC.
Thank you, Steve. And I'll try to keep that in mind over the next 3 years.
Okay, any further comments or questions? We have a motion and a second on the table. I think we're ready to vote, Kim.
Online voting is open.
I'm voting yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is agenda setting for our next meeting, which we've agreed, I believe, to meet every week at 5 p.m. to talk about primarily our COVID-19 response plan, but also to take care of any business in front of us to keep the district moving forward. So I think that's the recommendation for a meeting on March 31st would be to basically do what we did tonight, take care of business and get an update on COVID-19 and see where we are as a district. Anything else directors would want to see on our agenda next Tuesday?
Then maybe that's our opportunity as an admin team to say thanks to you, because Kim and I always joke that a day like next Tuesday is a holiday because it's 5th Tuesday of the month. And so normally we never have a meeting on the 5th Tuesday of the month. And so we just would like to express our appreciation to you as a board for your willingness to sit down on a weekly basis. There's a lot that happens on a day-to-day, sometimes even an hour-to-hour standpoint right now. And having the opportunity to engage with you on a weekly basis, we believe is going to be able to keep you up to speed and hopefully it won't feel quite as much like drinking out of a fire hose by being able to be together weekly. So both for the last this week and last week and moving forward, we'd like to say thanks to you as board members for your willingness and commitment to put time aside on these Tuesdays to meet.
Thanks, Steve and team. I think it's really helpful for us to get information, ask questions, because we're getting asked lots of questions from community members as well. And so us staying current and being able to support with, good, accurate, timely information is super helpful too. And also kind of, the context of the consideration, right? Because none of these are easy. And there's a lot of different ways we could be doing our meal service or our technology and understanding the care and the thought process and the rationale and the context, I think helps us be good advocates out in the community as well. So these are very helpful meetings. So we'll be efficient, but and I do thank everyone for agreeing to come together next Tuesday for this session. And then Ruthina is noting that we should have next week a short update on P&G.
No, I wanted to talk to the folks in the room. I would actually like to do a Zoom P&G meeting.
Got it.
No need. Yes, Chase, sorry. Especially now that we can do it all like this way. My hope is that we can get the team together and do that if people's schedule would allow. It doesn't have to be on Tuesday. But I really want us to continue moving forward on updating those policies. And I don't have my notebook in front of me, but I believe the concern was the next few series involve, I believe, learning supports. And I cannot remember what other, but I know we might need Diane, Laura, and Lisa maybe at the table. I can't remember. Can somebody jog my memory from the last meeting?
Yeah, I believe that's right. We probably want to check with Brady too. He's been instrumental in helping out with our work on the teaching and learning side right now and make sure we know what his availability looks like. But if you would indulge us in going back and going through those policy sections and making sure we got the right admin members tagged to that, and then coordinate with Brady and see what we can do about setting up. Kim, being the expert at that, we'll let her get some dates together and get some doodle dates out there so that we can find some that work for everybody.
Great.
Okay, well, I think we've covered our agenda for tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So Kim, can I ask a real quick question? Do we stay
Sure.
on?
No, you need to hang this up. Well, actually, I'll end the meeting and then I will open up the meeting for the closed session. So,
She sent you a second link.
yep, the second link, you should have had an email with the link to get into that meeting. If you don't, just shoot me an email and
Okay, perfect.
I'll get
Okay.
it to you. All
Bye,
right.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye,
Thanks so much.